we're super pro here.
I forget which episode this is. Is it 5?
Ooh, good question. I think it is 5. I think 4 was the event. Cool. Yeah.
Perfect.
Enzo's
Lovely.
allegedly sending in a track selection, but he hasn't done it yet.
No, he's also going to do a little
patch it
recording
in.
of his voice as well. I think just to prove the fact that he's unwell.
Yeah. No, he said he
sounds
was
awful on
feeling
the
terrible.
older-
Yeah.
Messengers. Yeah.
All right.
Says it's got worse after having COVID.
Yeah, he got some kind of chest infections and goodness knows what else, really.
That's not good.
All right, let's see how it goes. Well, hello everybody. This is FutureSounds FM. I'm introducing it this time, Patrick Fakeman, because we are, as you'll probably be aware, missing an Enzo.
Down a member.
But
be down a
what we
member.
have done is brought in a new member to, number one, not necessarily fill the space, but ultimately bring his thoughts, feelings, opinions, and views to the vapor world. So, as usual, we've got Thom with us from Don't Lens. Hi, Thom.
Evening.
But also the one and only Rob Dyson.
Hello. Ex Forever Synth. Nice to be back on the airwaves.
How have you been?
I've been all right, you know. Yeah, I haven't been to anything for a while. Went to a little gig called Future Sounds a couple of months back. That was
Yeah,
nice.
it was rubbish, wasn't it?
That was blooming great. Really enjoyed myself.
It was good in the end.
guys.
But
It was very good.
Thank you for coming down. You've dusted off your microphone for us.
Yeah,
we've
dusted it down.
We've been talking to you for a while about coming on anyway, hadn't we? And sort of getting involved in it. I think the idea was that rather than just me, Enzo and Thom chatting away and doing what we do, is that we would incorporate some other people, some friends, some... are you an influencer, Rob? Is that what you are?
Oh, I don't think so. Not anymore.
Not anymore.
No, maybe when we had the show, but then barely. No, I'm just an interloper. Yeah, call me an interloper.
Well,
but it's lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, welcome. It's nice to have you here. You sound crisp and clear and smooth, which is the main thing.
Wonderful. I just wish my voice could go down an octave because it's ever so high when I get excited.
Thom, how have you been?
Yeah, all good. I spent the bank holiday weekend looking after some slightly mad cats. Which is a little taste of your life, I think.
Mm-hmm. How did that go? Was it successful or was,
Yeah, it was successful, but just as I was about to leave, Cat got hold of some chicken bones and started splintering them into small pieces, which was terrifying.
I think that's a bad thing for cats. I'm not sure if they're allowed to do it or not.
Yeah, it's a really bad thing.
Did you give him permission? Did he give a note?
No, he stole it off my plate.
What?
Right off the plate.
Right off the plate. That's dog territory, that is. Have a word. No, they're not your cats.
No, they're my aunt's cats. And I'm also not convinced they're sort of domestic cats. I think it might be like a small cheetahs or something. They were sort of zoo animals.
Stray animals.
Ones that she's found on the streets.
Yeah, we love the chicken bones.
Mm-hmm. What we are doing, though, is we're probably venturing into some protected cat podcast territory. So we probably won't go down that road because I don't know enough ins and outs to talk about it for now. But what we do know enough about is music. Sweet music. Sweet music. I guess it's probably worth me mentioning a little bit about what we've been up to since the last podcast. So last time we were in your beloved listener in your ears, we were talking a little bit about the Future Sounds event. It was a kind of a debrief, really. I think it was an opportunity just for everyone to have a bit of a breather, a thought about what had gone on, half the things that we could remember, half the things that we couldn't remember. But anybody been up to anything interesting since then? I know, Rob, you mentioned you've not done anything music-wise since then. Anything else that's been on the table, apart from just the work-life stuff?
Family life, work-life balance, really. It's a bit, I'll say it's dull, but it's not. It's incredibly fun. And Thom, you've got all this ahead of you when you have your newborn soon. But yeah, man, nothing too exciting. But you guys have just been up to Bristol, haven't you? Or you have, Martin?
I went to Bristol. I went
Mr. Fakeman?
Yeah, I saw Jay, as in Jay, who joined us last time from TimeSlave/MPF. We went to Tales from the Crypt 2, which was more of a synthwave, dark synth event. A bit of opportunity to blow off some steam with some, quite dark and heavy, loud music. It went well. Ironically, I know Jack would have no problem in saying this, but there was a couple of sound issues which just brought back deep
Orange
scars,
memories.
deep scars and memories
Seems to
from
always
our,
be the way.
But other than that, it was very good. It was also nice to meet a few people that I hadn't met before. Bristol's a nice place, been there once before. But yes, it was a good time had by all. And of course, touch upon it, of course, for those synthwavy people that are listening to this podcast, for those that are in the London area, we have the midnight this week as well on Saturday. So I think I'm seeing you in the flesh again, Rob, aren't I, for that one?
You are. I'm going to give you a big hug. Big sweaty hug. It's ironic because I bought the tickets for this ages and ages ago, and then they put on this extra little cheeky little secret gig, not even a secret gig, but a cheeky little extra gig in Kingston, which is on my doorstep, my old stomping ground, but I wasn't going to go to both, and I can't make it anyway.
No.
But I would have liked to have seen them in a 200 capacity venue in that intimate environment, but I'll see you guys at Brixton.
For those in South London, it's Prism. So many people that have either been sick or pulled in that club, I'm sure.
My God.
Many people that have.
When I was young, it's had several names over the years. I think to kind of erase its rotten, notorious history, so they just rename it every time. I think it might have been Volts when I was a youngster, but certainly, I've fallen asleep in that club. I've been kicked out by bouncers in that club. I've had snogs in that club, all sorts. Fallen asleep on a hoard of coats and been told to sling my hook. It's a nice place. There was a stabbing there once.
It's a shame that you can't go back, surely.
No, it's going to be good. I would have slept through the midnight quite happily. But no, looking forward to it, man.
Yeah, it should be good. Should be good fun. So what we will do this time round, I'm just checking I don't sound too echoey. What we will do this time round is we have, Thom, you'd had a catch up, it's probably a little while ago now, with OSC, is that right?
Yeah, a good couple of weeks ago.
Oh, lovely Steve.
Is when
he's a nice fellow.
Steve and myself were both teachers, so the Easter holidays was an opportune moment to have a good chat. It turned into quite a lengthy chat, actually. So I think the version that's going out is slightly abridged, but if people want to hear the uncut version, maybe that will appear at some point.
Was there lots of kind of?
It got real nerdy.
Did it? Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, was there a lot of that kind of mutual teacher kind of bitching going on, or was it all right?
No, we've got a separate podcast for that.
Talks about the students you hate.
So I'm glad that he managed to take the time to speak with you, and thank you to him for doing it. Rob, had you had him on your previous show?
Yeah, we did have him on, and he's very prolific, right? Because he's done numerous broadly synthwave releases, and then he did the vaporwave version of I can't remember what's the name of it. Fakeman.
You may know
sort of city pop. Yes, that's the one. Thank you, Thom. That's the one. And then he released all those like ambient records. I'm probably spoiling the interview, but I love the fact that he put those on YouTube, like his little tutorials, where he would strip back. Because what he does, which is quite incredible, is he would just revisit a tune, strip it back, do a piano version, strip it, do a different version, do a different take on it, So he's a prolific guy. I'm looking forward to hearing the interview. He's also a very nice man.
Yeah.
Was he nice to you, Thom?
Yeah, he was. I think Steve being so prolific and doing, so many different styles is really the theme of the interview. I went in there with quite a strong hypothesis that he was a punk, even though he makes this very technical, complicated sort of jazz fusion music. I was sort of putting it to him. I think he indulged my argument. I think just like he's a true DIY artist, but as well as being a perfectionist and having these very sort of high slick standards, it's an interesting combination. I think you can be a sort of DIY artist without making 3-chord rock and roll music, which is clearly not what he does.
Did he touch upon? I'm sure we'll hear it, but he touched upon the production he's done for other people, like Neverman's album and Neverman's next album coming up.
Yep.
Lovely.
Tom's saying
I can't
nothing.
flip him wait.
Tom's saying
no.
Nothing. He's keeping
Spoilers.
He's keeping it all for the interview.
I'll just listen.
Fab. Well, what we'll do, as we always do, before we go into the main body of the interview itself, it might be an opportunity for us. We haven't spoken for a little while to get a bit of an idea about what the three of us have been listening to. If anything, I like to think we've been listening to something. So I'm going to throw it out to Thom first this time around.
Sure. I normally have to wait for Enzo's sort of 2 or 3 picks to get my turn.
That's why we're being efficient this time round, aren't we? Eh?
Okay. Having accused him of being indulgent, I'm actually going to be like slightly indulgent myself. So I'm not picking any of my own music as such, but my pick is quite a recent release from an artist called Sky Yamaha. And she put out a record called Rituals, which came out on, I think it came out on VA10. Certainly the physical did. I think she might have released the digital as a self-release. The indulgent part of this is that I've got like some kind of consultant credit on this project, which makes me feel like Kanye West or something. But it's an incredible piece of work. So it's sort of kind of sits between vapor and synthwave. Has this sort of 90s kind of Enya aesthetic, this kind of sort of dungeony video game aesthetic. Like that's the thing that comes across most clearly, but I actually think there's a lot going on that sort of reminds me of things like The Art of Noise and, you know, like really, really inventive groups of the sort of late 80s, like Japan, David Sylvian, Blue Nile, that kind of thing. Like really, and you know, Sakamoto, Hosono, you know, that kind of thing as well. Like this is serious stuff, and it's up there in my opinion. Just a really beautiful piece of work. The album's called Rituals, but the tune I'm going to pick is called New Bones.
New Bones. Can I ask before we play it, what was your input onto it then, Thom?
I mean, really, she just.
Did you make the tea?
I mean, it sounds very grand. So my credit on it is as mix consultant. But I mean, she just sent me the record to kind of listen to, give some mix feedback. But you know, I mean, what I was sent was immaculate already. I just made a few sort of mix suggestions, and I've got a nice consultancy credit on it, which is pretty cool.
A couple of hand claps.
Yeah. The hand claps are all hers.
The sound of a boiling kettle
in the background, exactly. Yeah. So say it again, Thom, and then we'll play it through.
Sky Yamaha is the artist. The album's called Rituals, and the song is called New Bones.
So, Rob, to be fair, what I should have done is gone to you first. That was just rude, given that you've arrived today. But as you know, because I think we kind of prepped you for the fact that we would be doing a little bit of a show and tell on some music. I'll let you go next with what your pick was this week.
Thank you. Well, I've been, since we stopped Forever Synth, I've listened to fewer and fewer Synthwave records and been, dabbling a little bit in more vaporwave stuff. But I mean, really, I am going to be quite sycophantic because the album that I've been listening to most is Timeshare 94's new release. And I'm not even going to say it right. Groot-in-België, is that how one pronounces it? And my pick would be Wakker, which is the second track in Wakker. And of course, Thom, you mastered this, so I am really blowing smoke up your bum here.
Yeah.
But it's a lovely record. I mean, for me, it's just very broadly in the church of vaporwave. But the fact that it was like a labour of love, very specific, exceptionally special, exclusively sampled Belgian rock, disco, folk, rave, Belgian covers of stuff like Smooth Operators in there. It's just a wild ride and something radically different. And as well as vaporwave, man, I can hear sort of Square Pusher and Boards of Canada in there and DJ Shack. It's a real genre bending vaporwave album. So that'll be my pick.
It's very good that Enzo's not here, actually.
Because would he just be like,
he'd be
just
patting his back,
showing off? I am kissing his behind.
That's right.
And Jay.
We will have to at some point. It's how we got here, isn't it?
That's how we get there.
Drop the bass.
Drop the bass.
So I'll go slightly differently because whilst this isn't a vaporwave artist, I think the most recent release that he's brought out this last week's got some very kind of chill, vapory vibes to it that people may or may not have heard before. So a good friend of mine, Sunglasses Kid, Edward, last week released a small EP,
it's brilliant,
for the first time, called Nightlife, which had kind of had a weird genesis in the sense that he'd, as many people know who follow him on Instagram, he sort of will be up at 4 a.m. just making loops on Instagram Live, or he'll do something and then just post it as a small 30-second Instagram post. And I think he had enough tracks and enough positive feedback to kind of develop them, play around with them a bit more, extend them out, and he's created an EP called Nightlife, which is just kind of real, almost, some of it's lo-fi, it's got that kind of 90s neo-noir kind of movie vibe to it, and so it's a whole EP of just quite slow, I would say at points vapory kind of tunes. So the one I was going to pick this week was Brokedown Love from the Nightlife EP from Sunglasses Kid. It's just, how does he describe it? Let's have a look at it here. He gives Nightlife is an unofficial, raw, uncut mixtape of instrumentals inspired by late night 80s and 90s erotic neo-noirs, trashy pulp novels.
Erotic.
Desert motels and surf shacks. So, yeah, they're just extended edits from stuff that he'd thrown together. And I think he was saying that, ultimately he'd mixed these on his headphones and just threw it out there. Self-release, no label. So I was quite impressed with it. It fits the kind of the vibe of this show, which of course we kind of go for something different to the work than the shows that myself and you, Rob, have done before. So I've picked Brokedown Love by Sunglasses Kid.
Great stuff. You know what? I snapped this EP up for £6, the price of a London pint. It's really, really good. It's similar to what Duet did with Outlines, which was just release a bunch of small Insta tracks and then extend them and turn them into a EP. And I know I'm talking over the intro or whatever, or however we're going to edit this, but it didn't Strange Your Love. Wasn't that conceived in the same kind of way? For a kind of Insta track that he dumped, and Ollie Ride was like, I like that.
Yeah, I think they just thrown together something, and then Ollie grabbed it and it went from there. So it's Instagram. Well, I guess this is just the world that we live in, isn't it? There's the individuals that will work on stuff at home, but at the same time just creating loops and creating tracks for 30-second snippets, and they become these EPs and big tracks. So yeah, I just I liked it. I thought it fit our little podcast.
Hey guys, what's happening? It's Enzo here. Sorry I couldn't make it on the pod this week. You can probably tell from my voice, I've been struggling for the last 10 days with COVID. And actually, the after effects have been worse than the COVID itself, which I didn't even realise I had. But it's meant 10 days stuck at home, listening to music, just trying to get recuperated, rested, which is hard when you've got a 10-month-old baby. So my pick for this week, I've listened to a lot of music, but the one that's really struck me this week is getting a repress on EPR on Friday, which may be in time for when this pod comes out. It's FM84, their album Atlas, which came out, I believe the last time it was pressed was about 4 years ago, but it might even be 6 or 7 years since the album came out. It's absolute gold synthwave. I'm sure that everyone's heard it. I could pick one of the more obvious tracks featuring Ollie Ride's vocals because they're immense, but the track that really got me into the album, the first one I heard was on a playlist that someone made and sent to me. It's called Arcade Summer, so that's going to be my track for this week. Elsewhere in the world of NPF and TimeSlave, we've got 80s Stallone's album Engaged, which is out on Friday. That's an absolute banger. This guy's an OG. He was in the documentary Rise of the Synth. He's a real character. He's been around for a hell of a long time, really talented producer. And of course on NPF we've also got Miami Virtual 2.0, which is long been requested on vinyl. We've got 3 different versions, including a fan club exclusive. So yeah, check those out on Friday, and I hope to be back for the next episode. Take care all, stay safe, it ain't gone nowhere. This is FM 84 with Arcade Summer.
Fabulous. Okay, so Thom, is there anything that you want to say about OSC before we crack on and have a bit of a chat with him? Or sorry, before you have a bit of a chat with him and we have a bit of a listen?
Yes, I caught up with Steve, Opera Science Collective, to discuss his background, his career, what's on the horizon, and he's also been kind enough to record an artist mix for Club Flamingo, the MPF fan club. Let's go with that. He's a fascinating guy, super talented, super nice, and I think you're going to enjoy this. So, my interview with Steve, aka Opera Science Collective. Nice one. All right, I'm going to count to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, you went. I went on 4, mate. You went after 4.
That's all right. I can work it out from that.
You sure?
That's good. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. It's nice to speak to you. I don't think we've ever chatted properly. I think we've interacted loads, haven't we? But
yeah, we've interacted online, but never actually sort of talked in person. So yeah,
it's one stage removed from a real life meetup, isn't it?
Yeah, man. It'll happen at some point.
That's the next step. Well, it has started happening. So I'm here in my capacity as representative of FutureSounds FM. So that's the name of the podcast. So it's me, Enzo from MPF, and Patrick Fakeman.
Nice.
And we did like our first live event just a couple of weekends ago.
Yeah, man. I saw the footage and stuff. It looked good. Definitely got to try and make something happen there.
Yeah. So the name of the podcast, FutureSounds FM, and to me, there's like this kind of implicit irony that we make music, we talk about music that's being made now, but like there's the elephant in the room is that these genres, so the genres that the podcast covers and the genre that you make as a musician that I dabble in as well as synthwave, vaporwave, future funk to an extent, although I don't think that really applies to either of us, and city pop. And the elephant in the room is that these are retro genres.
Yeah. Yeah, they are. I guess it's one of those things of kind of looking back and understanding in order to move forward. And sometimes when you look back, you find stuff that you like and that you don't hear particularly reflected in modern day or contemporary stuff. So, be the change you want to see, and so if you want to hear music with some more synthwavy or city pop elements, gotta make it.
Future sounds.
Everything's cyclical, everything comes and goes and comes back again. I'm at the point now where stuff, the clothes people wore when I was a teenager and the music people listened to when I was a teenager is kind of now looked on as kind of vintage, retro, fashionable, and aside from that being really depressing and making me feel really old, it's quite alarming, and it's the first time I've really understood sort of things that like my parents would say when I was a kid, like when aspects of 60s fashion had come back in.
Yeah, the 90s was the 60s, wasn't it? If you think about the kind of, Britpop guitar bands, those were 60s beat combos, weren't they?
Yeah, at the time it's like, whatever, old man, shut up. But now it's like, I see kids walking down the street dressed similarly to how I might have dressed in 1998.
But yeah, everything comes back. It's a sort of 25, 30 year cycle, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems that way. So all of this like synthwavy, city pop, future funk, vaporwave stuff, everything that's dipping into, like regardless of what has ever been fashionable or unfashionable, I've always kind of clicked with that style of source material. So when I hear these sort of late 70s, early 80s kind of things that blur the line between disco, funk, R&B and soul, I've always had a soft spot for that. I've always been a sucker for that vibe, those tonalities, that approach to songwriting as well, which whilst the tonal aesthetic comes back, I don't know that the songwriting style has come back per se. Like when you just look at the complexities of arrangements and the more dare I say, sophisticated approach to harmony. A perfect example where this is happening is Silk Sonic. You know, the thing with Bruno Mars and Anderson .Paak. And I think what makes that stuff sell itself so convincingly is that it not only have they nailed that tonal aesthetic of like 70s R&B soul, but they're writing the music as if it's the 1970s, you know. And if you track things back, a lot of the guys producing, writing and arranging in the 70s and even up through the 80s, they were like jazzers who'd basically couldn't do jazz anymore because there wasn't enough of a scene, and you've still got to put bread on the table. So they'd end up working in pop. I mean, Quincy Jones is a perfect example of a guy who's come from the jazz world into the pop world, and he's just brought all of that jazz stuff with him. And that all just carries over, and that sort of filters out through all of what was going on. And you listen to anything from the late 70s and early 80s, and there's just an air of like a sprinkling of clever things everywhere. And I think you just vibe with that because it's hard to find and relate with in the music that you're listening to in the 90s and 2000s. You see straight through it, if that makes sense. Like you just see through stuff. You see through it. You hear it straight away, and there's nothing to kind of grab you and go, yeah, man, this is awesome.
I think, you know, as retro musicians working now, we set ourselves quite a difficult task because that a lot of the reason, you know, obviously there are like auteurish figures involved in the music from that era, like Quincy Jones, for example, you know, being this kind of sort of giant, but like really like that music was put together by teams of specialists, and we have to be generalists in this era, and we kind of, for budget reasons and, you know, technological reasons, we can and we do everything ourselves. You know, I mean, you're a good example of this because you do, you know, your own video editing and graphic design and play all the parts. You know, write the theme tune, sing the theme tune. You know, but there's something really cool about that, and I think actually that is possibly what appeals to the audience. This kind of DIY thing. But like, that is probably the reason why the retro music, you know, we and people, you know, like us make now, the reason why it doesn't sound exactly like the music of the late 70s and the early 1980s is, you know, because we don't have, you know, Steve Gadd or Jeff Porcaro on speed dial.
Exactly, yeah, and that's the hard thing actually. That's the sticking point for me. A lot of the times I reach a point with ideas or projects where it's just like, I become very aware of my own limitations. Like on an album I did last year, I was fortunate enough to draft in a few session players here and there. It's all online stuff, you know. It's like you send them the stems, they lay down a guitar part or a saxophone part or whatever, and then send it back. And I just find it elevates things, and it makes it much more aligned with the kind of sounds I want to be making to begin with, even though like technically it's not me making all of the sounds now, but you know, in terms of the vision of what you want the end product to be like, you know, there's only so far that a one-man band can take things, you know, needing those extra individuals to sort of sprinkle some magic on things, because stuff always happens, or things that get done that wouldn't occur to you. So
yeah, there's no shame in that. Like if you think about Steely Dan, or you know, the kind of their solo projects and stuff, you know, that became a feature, not a bug, right? Like Walter Becker like almost stopped playing guitar. He's like, well, you know, Larry Colton's going to do a better job than me, you know, and we can get him in. Yeah. And I think like actually their way of working isn't too different to our way of, you know, sending WeTransfers across the globe, because you know you would lay down the guide tracks, and then you would get one guitarist in to try a peg solo one day, and then that didn't work. You'd get another guy in the next day to do overdubs. You know, it's not that different. No,
totally. And it's great. Like sometimes I do sort of almost pinch myself, and I think back to even like 10 or 15 years ago, it was so much harder. But now, like, it seems everyone and his brother's got the kind of the YouTube starter pack, that kind of £159 bundle of a Focusrite with an interface with a cheap condenser, and off you go.
Yeah, that's a meme format now. It's like it's like if you go back to a guy's house and you see a Scarlett interface and a, you know, whatever it is, Rode NT1A.
Yeah, and
like,
the girl leaves.
Get out.
Yeah. So we're all kind of doing this as a side hustle. Like, we both work in education because that's what pays the bills and puts food on the table. And then the music stuff is like a nice little top up on that income.
Yeah, but hustle, not hobby, right? Like that's the distinction. Like there's an element of professionalism to it, isn't there?
Oh yeah, no, totally. Like, and this is something that like my some friends and family don't get. Like they always sort of refer to it as it's nice to have a hobby that pays, and it's like.
It's more than that, isn't it?
I'm like, yeah, I'm sure it is nice to have a hobby that pays, but this is kind of, you know, if I think of myself and who I identify as, which I know is a very first world luxury, but nevertheless, it's like, it's OSC first, and it just so happens that I also do some teaching to pay the bills.
Yeah. The significant factor in like which occupation you put first shouldn't be like what percentage of your income, you know, that forms. I think it should be like how you define yourself. I had like a big flip when I used to identify. I'd say I'm a music teacher and I make a bit of electronic music on the side. Yeah. And then, you know, my friend who's a classical composer, I'll shout him out actually, he's called Alex Nikoparenko. He makes like contemporary classical music, nice piano music and stuff. You know, he's a piano teacher. He probably makes 90% of his living teaching piano, but he would always say, like, very confidently, I compose music and I also teach piano.
Yeah.
And I think like that flip, like I think it's really important, and I think you take yourself more seriously as an artist, and you know you put more of yourself into it, and actually you stand more chance of graduating from hobby to hustle to, you know, an element of, you know, proper professionalism, semi-professionalism, full professionalism, whatever.
Yeah, totally.
You know, it's a spectrum.
I mean, whilst I don't buy into all the like life coachy stuff, like you do hear that whole thing about like manifest your destiny or whatever. And yeah, the more you think of yourself in that regard, I mean, for the amount of time I spend on OSC versus the amount of time I spend teaching, OSC is earning more than that.
You're overperforming.
Yeah, thank you. I'm
what are you doing? You're outscoring your XG.
Yeah, totally.
That's good.
Yeah. So you know, and the trajectory, you know, when I can't, because I'm a bit like nerdy and anal, so I keep track of all of this stuff on spreadsheets and whatnot. If I can keep that going, that maybe one day it can be the full-time gig.
That's really good. I think in Vaporwave, because there's been this sort of anti-consumerist kind of drive from the beginning, there is a suspicion of the kind of creeping professionalism, but like I think people need to remember, and I can't remember who's like take I'm stealing. I think it might be Adam Harper's, but like it's really important to remember that like selling tapes or t-shirts is not the same thing as like being Jeff Bezos and like dominating the act of shopping. You know, like you're not a hyper capitalist for like selling a few t-shirts and stuff. Like that's corporatism. It's like what people have done since the beginning of time, and it's what happens in all economic models. Like you make stuff and sell stuff direct to the consumer. Like there's nothing shameful about that.
There's a joke in the synthwave scene, isn't there, that there's like it's the same kind of few hundred artists constantly buying each other's music, and they're sort of keeping each other fed and clothed.
That's how money works anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So it is important to keep some sort of distinction and realism, I should say, that the people behind these cool-looking online avatars making this interesting music, they are people that need to survive.
I think it's difficult for... I mean, I don't know your exact age. You probably don't know my exact age. In full disclosure, I'm 32.
Well, I'm 37, so...
Okay, so it's not much, but I think we probably might have lived through a very similar thing, which is like a kind of sweet spot of like everything on the internet being free and it being easier to pirate stuff than it was to purchase stuff legitimately. And actually there's an element of that now with like how convoluted and irritating like subscription based models are, you know, when you just want to own something outright. And we might be going back to the days where it is easier to get stuff for free, but I think my kind of age cohorts lived through an era of everything being available for free, and I think it's difficult to adjust to this idea of paying for like virtual content, you know, whatever that is, software, stuff that you buy off Bandcamp and stuff. I think it's quite difficult. The people younger than us, maybe because they're a little bit more tech illiterate, which is maybe a boomer opinion, but there's possibly a tough
maybe
it's because they're tech natives, but they're tech natives with touchscreen devices and stuff, and you know, Apple devices where, you know, they just work until they don't. But there's no, this is, you know, we grew up with devices breaking the whole time, and you know, having to repair them. I think I mean you're much better at repairing things than I am. I think you know how to operate a soldering gun.
I've
what's it even called? Iron? Is it an iron or a gun?
Yeah, it's a soldering iron. No, I've got a soldering iron just down there. It's
I've noticed that you give back to the community by sort of kind of explaining this stuff, don't you? Like I think I've got like a few hot takes. I've sort of been like teasing my hot takes, but like one of my hot takes is that like, even though like you're a very long way sonically from like a punk, right? Because you don't make 3-chord guitar music, like you're very much like a DIY musician. You know, in that you literally like, bar a few sort of guest features and stuff, you do everything yourself. And I think there's like a very sort of modern, or maybe even like postmodern aspect to the fact that you put a lot of content out there, like what you were saying with this ambient music, you know, like some, you know, stuff that you've worked on for ages and stuff that you've worked on for a relatively brief period of time. It's just out there. It's information, you can access it. Part of that is, you know, you're doing these blog posts and stuff and saying, you know, this is how I make XYZ, this is how you fix cables, blah, blah, blah. It's all information for people who are interested in you to access. Yeah. And I think that's like you know, you're a retro musician, and you're interested in like quite slick, sophisticated musicianship and, you know, techniques and stuff. But there is something quite DIY and quite punk about that. Yeah,
I mean, I see what you're saying, because like part of it is never having the not always having the money to do it, but also just not subscribing to like trends of like, oh, you must have this software plugin or you must have that thing. And it's like, look, man, when you look at what's been achieved in the past with by today's standards, crazy limitations, it's like, no, we've no excuse. You've got something that in 1970 any musician would have murdered you for. Like the even if you're using like a free DAW on a budget laptop or something, like it's a world of possibility. And I think I've always been wired that way. And even before, like I remember when everyone was buying PS1s and N64s, I was still quite happy, like figuring out how to complete lots of obscure games on my Super Nintendo. Like I wasn't immediately wowed by the graphics, which of course were impressive, and wow, the new formats and the different controllers, but firstly I couldn't afford one, and secondly, like I knew I still had a lot of untapped potential in what I had. And literally so over here on my left is my Jupiter 50, which I've had since 2015, and I don't think there's an OSC tune that doesn't have that on in some way, shape or form. I know it inside and out. I just, you know, it's like you've got to learn it and get everything you can out of these things, and coming up with good ideas in the first place, ideas that stick and land and have some conviction to them, you know. And I've always kind of just thought that I'd rather have some weird and wonderful things that I have to fix every so often to keep going, like my Yamaha DX21 up here, which, you know, it adds a little bit of a distinction, a bit of spice that separates you from everyone else who's using the same half a dozen plugins.
I like this picture that you're painting, right, of like almost that your tastes were formed at a relatively early age, and like, not to say that your tastes haven't evolved, but like you've retained things that you're interested in. You've kind of held them dear, like as kind of sort of trends with shorter cycles have kind of been and gone. Like you've kind of not been kind of swayed by the winds of fashion. I like that picture. Like I was saying to you earlier that I think I've been going back through your discography, and like it's remarkably consistent, and there's like big kind of sonic signifiers that have remained, you know, from, you know, what earliest OSC releases are when, 2015?
I mean, there's some junk from like 2013 and 2014, but that's really not. That's just me. Just
it's not junk though, because I was going back to the, you know, the earliest stuff that's available on streaming and your Bandcamp and stuff, and it's like your evolution as an artist has been, you know, it's audible and visible, but it's like you haven't like tried to reinvent the wheel with every release and stuff. Like I think you've kind of remained true throughout, and I think it's actually really admirable.
Cool, thank you. That's not a conscious thing. That's just I don't know, man. You just kind of you do what you know, and maybe it's a lack of imagination. You know, I always sort of fall back on certain sort of sonic palettes that I like more than others, or certain approaches to chord progressions and whatnot. But it's just you sort of, you know what you like. And I think also maybe coming at the age I am, you know, I spent most of my 20s kind of like creatively floundering and or like stockpiling a load of baggage that it was like, man, I really need to stop thinking about making music and actually make music. And so, you know, that all just comes flooding out, really, I guess. And then, almost like a philosophical approach that I try to always kind of put on my students and also like in my blog and stuff is that of like just never ever having your ears like switched off. Always be thinking and analysing everything you listen to. So for instance, like I'm a massive Chromeo fan. I love a lot of what they do, not just musically, but I like their whole approach to their online image and how they stay true to this particular type of aesthetic, and they've managed to grow that into a thing and bring other people into it and start their own label doing music like that and all this stuff. Now, I discovered Chromeo off the back of a hair gel advert in like 2011 or something. Like I just heard this synth hook, I was like, oi, that's like something from the late 70s or early 80s. What is that? You know, onto Google, what is the song on the Well advert or whatever it was?
No Shazam.
No Shazam, no. And then there it was. I was like, you know, a couple of YouTube videos later, I was like, yep, I'm buying this album, which was Fancy Footwork, which is just wall-to-wall bangers. Every single tune on that album is basically good enough to be a single. It's seriously cool, and that was a big motivator to like, because I'm hearing everything that's going on. I'm recognizing drum machine tones. I'm instantly like, yeah, I know I can do those synth fills. That's exactly the kind of thing I like to do. It's like somewhere between 80s pop and something you'd hear in Sonic the Hedgehog and something you'd hear from late 70s funk. And oh man, yeah, that's all me. Like, yeah. So I just started dabbling around with those sorts of things and enjoying doing that. So I guess it's like people say make the music that only you can make, and it's a great saying. It runs the risk of sounding really pretentious. Even from as soon as I learned to play piano, I was trying to make up my own things in my early teens. So, and I remember a few years ago watching an interview of Oscar Peterson, who's like my piano god, and he was talking about Art Tatum, who really is the only pianist who could ever shred harder than Oscar Peterson. And he said he learned to play a couple of things like note for note the way Art Tatum did, and then he was like, what's the point? If people want to hear Art Tatum, they will listen to Art Tatum.
You're at a place now where you've got like a fairly like strong sense of self, and like almost like I mean, stubbornness sounds like a really bad choice of word, but like, you know what you like, and it's like, I'm going to do what I like, and you know, if people enjoy that, then great. Was OSC kind of your first project where that kind of sort of fully reflected yourself?
Yeah.
What's the prehistory then?
It was mostly live stuff, playing with bands, that sort of thing. Just function bands, like cover bands. A little
good training.
Very good training. Good ear training. You know, just put you on the spot. Yeah, I've talked a number of times to students and whatnot about sort of being called up for a gig where you might only actually know half the set, you know, and it's literally like, at the start of each number, you just need someone to shout to you what key you're in, and it's like, right, off I go, you know.
But I mean, a large like percentage of what people want, you know, the kind of wedding band canon. I'm not trying to say that your music sounds like wedding band music, because that's really deep. But people like to party to disco, funk, soul tunes. Like there's something that's like universally joyous about it, you know, and like even like new songs which have entered that canon. You know, it's quite a hard canon to penetrate, but like Uptown Funk's in there, and like a whole lot of Bruno Mars is in there. So this music's genuinely popular, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
FutureSounds.
All of a sudden you're sort of 30 years old and you're teaching for a living, and it's like, man, where did my 20s go? Why am I still not a musician, you know? And so that's when it's like, right, I've got to start got to start something. And the initial idea was a lot less egocentric. It was the whole reason it's called the Collective is that my plan was that it would be a collective. I'd pull in people I knew, and kind of just try and make a platform where if they wanted to do something electronic and experimental collaboratively with other people, we'd pull it in and work on it and put it out that way. But it's actually, I mean, it was very naive of me. I think the big signifier, the big kind of identifier was the Yellow Magic Orchestra, right?
They're not an orchestra.
They're not an orchestra, but they are three very cool dudes who all had really strong solo projects that they were constantly running at the same time as doing this amazing pioneering experimental electronic music. And my idea was have something that you could abbreviate to 3 letters that could pull people in, use to, like, you know, make stuff collectively like the Yellow Magic Orchestra would do, but then everyone's also got their own sideline solo projects going on as well. So, you know, whilst I would contribute to the OSC stuff, I would probably also then come up with some other outlet for music release that only I made. But just to kind of fill a gap and test the waters, I put out some stuff that I alone had made under the banner of OSC. And during that time, some people that were initially interested kind of flaked out, and I understand they had stuff going on, you know. It was all fine. Like, it was just one of those things that it just kept going, and so I just kept sort of trickling things out under the OSC banner, and then after a while it developed a tiny little following, like 100 or 200 odd people on Twitter, and it was mostly done off the back of the video game music community, because I was almost as a way of just kind of experimenting, finding my feet a bit more, because I haven't really done anything in terms of electronic music production since university. So, you know, there's like a bit, you know, there's a 10-year gap, give or take. And so I was sort of refinding myself in terms of electronic music. And so a great way to do that, I found, was to download just a MIDI file of a tune from a video game that I knew and loved, and pick it apart and just start rearranging it and putting new sounds on, new drums and all the rest, and exploring what the synths that were just stock within Logic could really do, and just go from there. And then that ended up sort of by chance coming across some guys that ran the Radio Sega, which is just a community online radio station that just plays music from Sega games, and they have a remix show on a Friday night, and so they would put a song on, and then they'd invite me into their, this is before Discord server, so into their IRC, their internet relay chat, and you know, we'd shoot the breeze with them in there for a bit on a Friday evening and chat about music, and I ended up doing a few things sort of Sega and or Nintendo related, and that just seemed to just pull people in, and then I discovered Mitch Murder. And I was like, okay, that's what I want to do. This guy, damn, he is next level, and I still hold him up as like the ultimate synthwave artist.
The thing that I struggle with synthwave is, you know, the stuff, which it doesn't. 80s music does not sound like that.
No,
that's a French, you know, French 90s, French noughties thing. Like nobody used sidechain in the 80s. Like nobody used it to do that. And like I think the closest, I mean, some, you know, whatever, like, you know, like a Dead or Alive track or something, you know, like, or this, you know, kind of pounding club tracks had an element of that. But I think it's like, it was 80s movies, not 80s music that had those kind of sounds. Yep. But like your music, Mitch Murder's music, it has this VGM thing going on. It has this like synthwave, but leaning heavily on the synth aspect. Like I don't. There's a lot of synthwave where I don't hear much synth going on.
Yeah, no, totally.
But
I mean, I'm with you on this. I don't.
And City Pop more recently, both of you. Yeah. You and Mitch Murder both.
I finally beat him to the punch on that one as well. Like the number of times I've had an idea. And then, whilst I'm working on that idea, he's released something that's just like it. I'm like, he's done it again.
So your main Nomachi predates his.
Yeah.
Cool.
You know, so I managed to, like a month after I released mine, he released his, and everyone went, this is amazing. I was like, nice. Yeah, but look, I finally beat him to the punch.
That's cool. There's like something in the water, right? You know, when stuff like that happens, right?
Yeah.
Like,
mate, I've got all the time in the world for Mitch Murder. He is just brilliant. You know, he's one of those few producers where I listen to his work and I'm still like, how? It gets me fired up. You just hear it and you're like, that's bonkers, but it's absolute genius. You know, in the same vein that like when you listen to something like Songs in the Key of Life by Stevie Wonder, and there's so much interesting moments in every song all the time, and it still blows my mind because I listen to it countless times, and every time I'm like, what on earth possessed him to do that? And yet it's so perfect. That's just staggeringly brilliant.
I love that. You know, it's like there's kind of ballads and stuff, and then there's like a jazz fusion, like absolute shred fest in Contusion or whatever. You know, like those can sit on the same double record. I love that sort of late 70s kind of spirit of excess.
Yeah, it's just amazing. But so yes. Anyway, going back to synthwave, I'm fully with you on that. I don't listen to much. I listen to Mitch. In the early days, I sort of was like everyone seems to do it. They find synthwave and they go, wow, nostalgia binge, wicked, and they dive into it and they listen to loads of stuff. But and that's not for me. I don't really like making stuff with arpeggio bass notes.
I was sort of going back through your early catalogue and, you know, half expecting to hear that, and like it basically never happens, right?
No,
like,
there's a couple of moments on I did an EP called I Wish My Car Was a Transformer, which is in itself like an ironic kind of, even though I'm still trying to learn how to make synthwave at that point, I'm already making fun of it.
That's like too many cliches in one go, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, even by just calling it I Wish My Car Was a Transformer, like I'm slightly taking the mickey out of it, and you know that made no impression or shockwaves on any. But then I went down more of the kind of, I guess you'd say, fusing like Jan Hammer with kind of a slight sprinkling of Quincy Jones.
Yeah.
In making Girls on Bikes, and I bought my DX21 just shortly before that, and was like, oh, I'm using this on everything. So like the bass, a lot of the kind of like pads and like poly stab things, it's all DX21. So it really sounded of the time, and that's what went into Girls on Bikes, and that's the one that sort of like kicked things off, and suddenly people started paying attention to what I was doing. I was like, oh, okay, I'm obviously onto something here. I've struck a nerve, and that's good.
I think this kind of idea of artists being slightly ambivalent about genres coexisting with the idea that genres are actually quite useful. I think that's like a kind of nice cognitive dissonance to maintain, because like I think about, you know, my like sort of master I was gonna say master chef. I'm not that good at cooking. My mastermind kind of area of expertise is probably like 20th century minimalism, so like Steve Reich, Philip Glass, whatever, that kind of thing. And like these guys are all like, oh no, I'm not a minimalist, I hate that tag. And it's like, well, that term has really served you well, because it's just like a very useful way to identify yourself. And I think artists love having like a little kind of genre tag to help them sell, you know, tickets, get bums on seats, sell records and stuff, and then they can be very sort of, you know, you can be like a lovey about it and push against it. And I think like in your case, like having, you know, being associated with synthwave without being a synthwave artist is like brilliant, having your cake and eating it. And like the parallels with like my own like vaporwave projects, you know, particularly Donor Lens, which I do with Jay. We're not vaporwave artists in so many ways, but you know, it's useful. Like even like George Clanton, who's like a big figurehead for the scene, is like, he's really upfront about it. He's like, vaporwave, like I don't make vaporwave, but like it seems to be like a good marketing term, and it like seems to kick the algorithms into overdrive. So
you tag something #vaporwave, and like several bots will instantly retweet it, and then you know, and
useful. Genres are useful.
Yeah, completely. I mean, like, if I'm being entirely honest, like the whole reasoning behind doing the vaporwave version of Yume no Machi was I wanted to make an album that sounded like the reference material that vaporwave artists were sampling, because as enjoyable as hearing everything slowed down with reverb is, it's like I can't escape that. I just want to listen to the source material. And I wanted to make something like that, so I did. And then while I was early on in the production process, I just, out of curiosity, I stuck the vary speed on Logic and notched it down like 10 or 20%, and was like, this is vaporwave. This sounds like vaporwave completely. I've got to do this like proper. Like I'm going to make the whole album, and then I'm going to make entirely vaporwave. A, because it's an interesting thing to do, but B, it will probably help me pull in new audiences, and I don't see that as a bad thing to do.
No.
If me pouring my heart into something creative and making something fun means someone else wants to pay me for that, then that's brilliant. Isn't that like a wonderful way to earn a modest income? And so that was the reasoning behind making the vaporwave version of Yume no Machi.
That's not cynical. I don't think that's cynical, and I don't think you have to pretend like, oh, you know, my absolute favorite music is vaporwave music, like in order to kind of participate in that scene. Like that you can have like varying levels of engagement, and it's not. I don't think that's a cynical move. I think it's just it's presenting an option. Presenting your audience with a choice, because you know you say, you know, you can purchase this version, which is, you know, how it was originally conceived, or you can purchase this version which does like interesting sort of temporal effects and stuff. There may well be people who really like the kind of blissed out, slowed down version.
Oh, there are, some people are like completely all over the Vapor edition. Like, I had, you know, I had the odd bits of feedback when it first came out, and some people were like loving the Vapor version, you know, or some people that were like, not interested in the Vapor version.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's like, great, either or, you know, don't mind.
Yeah.
FutureSounds.
It's like a complex thing to wrestle with, this idea that like music is very democratic now, and you know, with what we were saying earlier, you know, laptop, red box, microphone to plug into red box, Audacity or whatever, Ableton Live Light, free software, off you go. It's difficult for us to let go of the fact that like artists making music like that way, you know, with you know, whatever, a few hours of experience under their belt, you know, may well become, you know, more popular, and they might make better art than us with like years of training and stuff, you know. It's a proper like ego check, isn't it? And it's like, you know, all ideas are valid, and I think it's stuff like vaporwave and like, you know, like other kind of experimental art, is like, it's really good to kind of check your sort of values and stuff. But like, I think, you seem quite secure in the fact that your values and, your kind of musical principles are sound, and that they have a place in this kind of marketplace of ideas.
So, okay, let's say that if I was to churn out simplified, like run-of-the-mill stuff that sounds like other artists, 3 chords for the whole song sort of thing. Now, I could do that, but there will be other people doing that better than me.
Yeah, I don't think I'd do it very well.
And why would anyone buy some second-rate run-of-the-mill stuff that sounds like 20 other people from me when there's 20 other people that sound like that but better? So in a way, it's probably, I always believe it's better to be niche and have my own like dedicated small audience who like stuff that is very true to me. The music, when I release stuff under the OSC banner, it is who I am, and you either like it or you don't. And if the only people that like it are a very small group of people, I'm too old and jaded to kind of care about popularity. It is what it is, and if I have a handful of followers who back me, that's wicked. I will always engage with them.
What you were saying about like the small audience thing, right? Stuart Lee writes in his book about, he was kind of on the cusp of being, he could be like one of those artists who sells out the O2 Arena and stuff. Yeah. Because, he's like has a sort of semi-household name and stuff, but, he's also got this kind of punk and kind of anti-establishment thing going on. And he kind of realised like those kind of tours are like, unless you really are Michael McIntyre, like you're going to break even at best doing that kind of thing. And it is so much better him playing, 150 person venue, selling it out, selling a load of merch direct to consumer at those events. And you don't get those kind of bullshit, like 15, 20, 25% merch cuts that like the, O2 branded or, Academy branded venues take. And it's like, being like a small size, in the grand scheme of things, a small artist selling direct to your consumer, it's A, it's nice, and B, you can, what money you do make, you can retain. Yeah. It's a good thing to be.
It's the 1,000 fans principle. Mm-hmm. If you have 1,000 fans that are really invested in you and they spend between £25 and £50 a year on an album, a bit of merchandise, and maybe coming to a live show, that goes directly to you. So that's 25 to £50,000 you'll make in a year. So if you can reach that kind of golden 1,000 dedicated fans who you can, with some degree of faith, know they'll have your back when you release new music. And that's
and your career isn't it isn't sort of like one kind of less successful album away from being doomed. Like the worst thing to be is being a mid-sized artist. I mean, you might have some amazing experiences, but you're gonna be chucked out at the end of the ride, broke and old and jaded. But like, I'd much rather be an internet-based musician selling direct to my fans, or I'd rather be I don't know, Ed Sheeran. Being Ed Sheeran might be okay as well.
Having lived in Brighton through the late 2010s, I did know a lot of people who were just starting to live the life you just described, of having been involved with acts that were on the cusp of going big, or were sort of, like you say, pottering around that mid-tier, and they thought, wicked, that's our life sorted, and then all of a sudden it's like you say, the roller coaster ends and off they go. And
you get spat out. Spat out the pipe.
And they're working as baristas or stacking shelves or something.
It is a good time to be a DIY artist. I mean, we've got more competition than ever. And you're kind of left alone so much. There's a lot of competition with yourself and kind of wrestling with negative thoughts and perfectionism and egomania, whatever. But it is a good time to be a DIY artist, and there is a generation of people who are more accustomed to paying for things on the internet rather than naughty pirates like me.
Yeah, no, totally. Going back to the genre discussion as well, like I almost have side projects within the project of OSC. So
that's good. You're a collective of there's a synthwave musician, a vaporwave guy, some ambient dudes. You got some lo-fi guy with his headphones on.
Yeah, it's all my alter egos, isn't it? It's I
like that. I've got a confession to make about Opera Science Collective. So Jay from Donalens turned up at my door last night because I think he came up to London from Wales and didn't have anywhere else to stay. And anyway, me and him were chatting about this, and my wife was sort of half listening in, and she sort of kind of combined a few sentences into one and thought that your project was called Steve's Science Project.
Mate, that's brilliant. That's my next album title. I love it. And just get like a really dorky, like I get myself dressed up to look like a dorky sort of 14-year-old kid or something with
lab coats.
Yeah, lab coat, nerdy glasses. Yeah.
There's that brilliant Thomas Dolby Blinded Me with Science. Do you know that?
Yeah.
What was I going to say? There's like some really iconic like Learn to Mix video, and like that's the kind of reference track for the whole thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know the one I'm talking about with all the little bubbles.
I think I've got it down
David Gibson, The Art of Mixing.
It's got all his little multicoloured bubbles. It's like peak vaporwave art, isn't it? It's so iconic. Yeah. They illustrate everything with that, don't they? And it's like, here's what it would sound like if the synth brass was like this.
Yeah, totally. It's
I mean, he's doing a bit though, isn't he? Because it's like really funny, the presentation, right? It's not. He knows this is naff. He is really playing up to it. It looks like a sort of whatever local TV channel or like some kind of youth pastor like making like a cool video.
Yeah, but that is how I still to this day visualize the music I make. I do think of things as like blobs of shapes of colour that move in and out.
Do you know what? I hear that in your music because, like, so in a previous episode I chatted to Carl from Runners Club, and he is like quite similar to you, I think, in that he's got like a very analytical mind, but he like his analysis. He has some similar interests to you, but like he will like apply this kind of rigorous analysis to like the music he likes, which is like unironically the Backstreet Boys, like unironically, and he will like dissect modern pop music as well, which he has like a conflicted relationship with. But he's like, so much modern pop music is like straight down the line, like no kind of panning and stuff. Your music, it really is these kind of blobs of color and sound. Like don't be afraid to put a melody panned fairly hard left, and something, it doesn't even need to have something playing at the same time to complement it the whole time, because something will happen later on in the right speaker, and it all kind of balances out over time. Like I remember being really afraid to pan things, and it's like your mixes are so boring and undynamic if you just slam everything down the center. Like don't be afraid, those controls exist for a reason.
And when you combine that with like just musical devices like call and response, so and you call from one side and respond from the other, and straight away that just opens things out completely. Totally.
It's nice. A little party in your ears.
Yep.
With
all the
cool.
collectives, all the different Steves partying in the brain.
Your science project. You've got like a couple of sort of statement albums, right? Like you've got the Amachi, and you got Ideality before it, right? Like those are pretty much like your two, like
they are
your equivalent of like your
they're like,
statement albums. And then like around that there's all sorts of things for people to pick and choose from. I think like one thing that's interesting amongst all that, so we're talking, you do like different versions of your own music in different styles, remakes of video game music, one-off singles, remixes, like you've done a remix for my own group, Donalens, blah blah blah. I think one of the really interesting things, which I can't think of many other people who do this, is concept EP, like not a concept album, but like that's the thing. So you got girls on bikes, boys on boards. That's the right way around, right? Right gender, right vehicle. And an upcoming one, which maybe we can or we cannot talk about, concept EP about a sport.
So I mentioned earlier about like going off on musical whims, and basically I went really far away from the style of music that I was making with girls on bikes and boys on boards. And I just one day had a bit of a whim to make something like that again. So I decided to kind of like brush off those presets and those techniques and pull out that same old drum palette and have a bit more of a play around with that. And I figured it didn't initially start off, I didn't start off thinking of it as being like the third part. And it's kind of not, because you've got girls on bikes, boys on boards, and then a common sense third point would be like, I don't know, something to do with the whole social clique of the teenagers all hanging out together doing something. And it's not that, but sort of stylistically it is very much the same as those two EPs. It feels like it's anchored in the same period of time. It is sporting. I guess the way I'd say is take the music of Girls on Bikes and Boys on Boards and apply that to a context that is 80s sports TV coverage montage things. So, you know, when you get to the end of a sports tournament and they're doing that big montage of all the highs and lows of that sporting tournament, maybe it's like a World Cup or something like that. And at the end of it all, and they put together that video montage and you get some awesome piece of like super kitsch retro-y music that goes along with it. I've basically churned out 20 minutes of that sort of stuff. And then I've managed to get on board a bunch of wonderful people, including your good self, to do remixes. So like the A-side will be effectively like the third of my releases that is in the spirit of Girls on Bikes, Boys on Boards. And then the B-side will be some very cool and interesting remixes made by some probably quite familiar names if you're into synthwave. So yeah.
Some more kind of left field shouts though as well, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Basically covering the full umbrella of genres covered by this FutureSounds podcast.
Yeah. But yeah, so I've got this EP coming out. I think it's slated for June. But I think we're still waiting on the vinyl to come back yet. So and vinyl pressing right now globally is a nightmare. So
I think things are speeding up ever so slightly. But Adele's kind of finished clogging up the pipes, and now Red Hot Chili Peppers have done like every possible variant of their most recent album.
Great, dear oh dear. So yeah, that's we're slightly at the mercy of the pressing industry, but
and the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yeah, but it's it's a 20-minute EP. It's high energy. It's probably the stuff I'm most recognised for. If my Spotify plays or anything to go by, so it is that kind of plucky, kind of slightly cheeky, jovial, self-aware, kitsch, funky in places, but always with that kind of like some nice harmonic groovy stuff going on as well in places, I think, at least anyway.
That's cool. So yeah, I mean that's coming pretty imminently. I think what will be available to your fans like sooner after this podcast airing is a very nice mix that you made for us for our sort of club. We're calling it the Club Classics.
Oh
series.
Right, yeah.
Not necessarily club as in a nightclub, although I mean your track selection is quite high energy. Not necessarily high energy as in the letters NRG. These are our disco tracks, aren't they? You know, we're talking Donna Summer.
Much. Yeah,
we're talking Madonna.
Yeah. There's a lot of it's basically if you went to a disco in 1983, it's probably a lot of the kind of things you might expect to hear. And
it could be a disco in the States, or it could be a disco in Japan as well, because almost half the selection is kind of Japanese city pop.
Yeah. It's it's just, I don't know, it's just how I get my kicks, I think. Like,
I mean, that's one of the drums I've been banging in this podcast, is that like your way of working is like quite postmodern, in that like, you know, there is this what do you call it, like kind of culture jamming, you know, like where you know you slam one thing against the other and see what happens. Like, I don't think what you do isn't necessarily as kind of violent or confrontational as, for example, like somebody like Fire Tools, who we've actually talked about her work before. Angel Markloyd, who's like who's done the mastering for Donald and stuff, but like her own music is like, you know, she is like, she shreds on guitar and she shreds on drums, but you know, this is combined with like sort of very gentle vaporwave, black metal vocals, 80s jazz fusion and stuff like that's a more extreme fusion. That's more adventurous cooking than any kind of more like tasteful fusion that you or I might serve up.
Yeah, totally. No, like,
but you know, there's still some culture jamming going on.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. But I think I always stay fairly anchored to my stuff's got I just want the groove. I want a groove that people can sit back and bounce on and relax on and just be like, yeah, that's fun. I like that. You know, and sometimes I've tried getting a bit more like wacky and weird and wonderful with it, and it's normally at the detriment of the groove. And for my own sort of creative satisfaction, I'd rather just have a good groove than indulge.
I want to hear this avant-garde Osk.
Oh no, 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 you don't. Yeah,
I think you're like lo-fi beats or like ambient stuff is like quite a sort of left field step. Like I mean, if you think about the history of ambient music or the prehistory, you know, thinking of sort of Eric Satie, you know, this whole kind of furniture music thing, or like Brian Eno with this kind of discrete music thing where he kind of conceived this ambient concept when he was recovering from a car accident and he was too unwell to stand up and turn the music up on the radio. You know, like the kind of ambient music is interesting because it's simultaneously like the easiest music to listen to, but it's conceptually quite confrontational and challenging.
It was a really interesting and I mean, you can tell by how much I made, like how much I got into it, and it coincided with all of the making of it. Coincided a lot with all of the beginnings of all the COVID lockdowns, and you know, there was so much tension in the air, so much uncertainty hanging over all aspects of life. I think I started putting. I'd done one album. I'd done the one Adventure Time themed ambient album called Ambient Time, and then that was proving such a hit on YouTube. I felt like I ought to follow it up with something, and the time was right because there was so much like tension in the air everywhere. You know, everyone was so like pessimistic and stressed out.
Yeah,
that every time I sat down to do anything musical, all I wanted to do was have like relaxing, calming soundscapes, and I thought, now's the time. And so I think I started it in the February. We here in the UK locked down in March, and I just spent all of that time just kind of, oh, what shall I do today? Oh, this sounds nice. What does 4 minutes of that sound like? You know, and I might just add a thing here and add a thing there, and just and always working off of the context of a TV show means that you can dip into the TV show and just watch an episode and go, oh wow, there's that funny weird noise in the soundtrack, because it's a very experimental soundtrack anyway, so there's lots of weird synth things happening and funny plucked instruments here and there, and you can just dip in and go, oh, I might see if I can find a tonality that's similar to that. And it's just such a cathartic exercise to go through amidst the kind of global pessimism of the lockdowns. I think it was probably really good for my health, actually.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that music, by definition, I think, sort of playing with this kind of concept of active and passive, right? With listening, and it sounds like what you just described. It sounds like, you know, like you making music was like almost part and parcel with you, like having some time to be at home and watch TV shows and stuff. And it's like, okay, you know, it
was half active, half passive. That's the thing. Like the listening is active and passive, but the creation was that as well. Because sometimes, you know, I'd just sit there and I'd just kind of play some chords and enjoy the sounds of them for a bit, and then try, you know. And
the Satie concept, like he called it, furniture music, didn't he? Music d'ameublement, like. It's literally like, this music has a function and I'm not ashamed for that. Like, it's not that like every piece of music that comes from my pen is like a great work of art that needs to be sat down and kind of appreciated in like hushed, awed tones.
No,
you know,
exactly.
It's like this music is functional and cool. That's good.
Yeah, but then also, like Brian Eno says, it should be as ignorable as it is interesting. And that affords you wonderful scope as the creator to just nest little Easter eggs, especially, like I say, going back to making this ambient music that is derived from feelings you get from watching a particular TV show. You can nest tiny little Easter eggs of tiny little motifs and other things that would normally be 1 bar or 2 bars of music done very quickly in the show. You can stretch it out over like 16 bars, and keen-eared listeners pick it up. There's one guy or girl, I don't know, who's commented on every one of my ambient projects with like a short essay, like time posting all the little things they spot that they referenced from TV shows, from the TV show, and hats off
these when you do this, it's not. Am I right in thinking that it's not like direct sampling? It's you. Like,
no,
referencing
no
things?
Sampling. It's hearing a melody and then, like I say, I'm manually playing that on the piano or whatever instrument.
That's cool.
Over like very, very slow paced.
So I've got a theory. Like, so I've been working on this Nobody Here vaporwave documentary, and I kind of put it to Carla Maria from Runners Club. And like I've got other kind of retrowave artists who are like sample free, but like working in predominantly sample based genres, that you can participate in sampling culture without directly sampling, grabbing somebody else's audio and doing it. You can participate in that culture by interpolating or referencing or whatever, and you do avoid a potential legal headache.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, one of the reason I first started doing the Vapor Session EPs, I heard somebody playing, it was like someone posted a video on Instagram of one of the tracks from Boys on Boards on vinyl, which is meant to be played on a 45, and they were playing it on 33.
Yeah.
And they were like, wow, if you play this on a 33 speed, it's got a real lo-fi aesthetic, real vaporwave aesthetic. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. And then very quickly my brain went like, oh no, what if like somebody like vaporwaves my music, and then I've got to like deal with all the boring admin of trying to like copyright claim it and
might be quite flattering as well.
Flattering, but also it is the idea that somebody might be massively profiteering off of vaporwaving my stuff did sit a little bit uncomfortably with me. So I thought to myself, nah man, I'm just going to do it myself, like head them off at the pass. I'll pick the most vaporwaveable tracks out of my back catalogue and see what they sound like. And I was like, these actually sound quite cool, quite funky. And it refreshed them for me as well, because I don't know about you, but once you've made something and it's out, I never go back to it. I don't think
on to the next thing, right?
Yeah.
I think some of the really old stuff, like I've always said this, but like the stuff that you've done most recently, which is normally what you're supposed to be promoting, I find hard to get excited about, because I'm I'm already working on something else. But like stuff that's really, really early in the canon, and I barely got any recollection of making it. It's like, oh, that's actually quite fun. No way in hell would I have done that now.
Yeah,
that's
exactly,
fun. But like, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
But I do think, I mean, to my ears, your discography is very consistent, and like there don't seem to be like major missteps to be embarrassed about. Like I wouldn't be embarrassed about anything in my catalogue if I was you.
Thank you.
That's what I hear. But yeah, let's wrap this up. But I just want to mammoth chat.
Long. Yeah,
I'll edit out some waffle. But yeah, it's been really, really good stuff. So yeah, thanks for giving up your time.
That's fine.
What's on the horizon then? What's next for Opus Science Collective?
Okay, so I've got. It's now getting on for months. I finished the soundtrack for a video game. That's hopefully not going to be much longer. Yeah, that hopefully won't be long. Same guy that made Crawlco Block Knockers.
That's the smutty one.
That's the smutty one, which ended up on the Nintendo Switch, which was amazing, because I in my little shelf of physical merchandise, as well as having vinyl and cassettes and CDs and mini discs, I now have a Nintendo Switch game as well, which is very satisfying.
Family friendly company, Nintendo.
You'd be amazed.
Smart.
PlayStation and Microsoft would not touch this game with a barge pole.
Wow.
Nintendo are quite happy. There's apparently
they used to run pay by the hour love hotels in the sort of late 19th century, didn't they, Nintendo?
Yeah.
FutureSounds.
is set in a haunted mansion that's occupied with like sexy vampires and things, sexy ghosts, sexy vampires it's a puzzle game, and you wander around and you solve puzzles, you run errands for these sexy vampires, and then they as a thank you for that, they show you stuff. And it's all very crudely drawn, cartoony.
They uncloak.
Yes, they do. They uncloak. Neverman, I co-wrote and co-produced an album with him. We started the project with nothing written, as opposed to the first time when he approached me with 2/3 of an album and said, I want to make an album, this is what I got. So right away from the conception of things, all the way from song ideas through to the album title, like we've really worked together creatively. I'm getting everything out through this Neverman project at the moment, which is really satisfying. If you like my stuff, you have to go and digest this album, because
well, you're very audible in the first one, and it sounds like you're going to be even more audible in this one.
Nice. I've definitely sprinkled in some city pop vibes in there, and there are some amazing collaborations on there too. We've got some wicked guest vocalists
nice.
who, put it this way, they are of a level where I didn't think we'd get them. In both instances, in one instance David suggested it and I was like, poof, okay, good luck, and she agreed, and it was like wicked. And in the other instance I was like, well, if she agreed, let's chance it with this guy, and David wrote to him and he was like, yeah, sure.
Wow.
In both instances they dug the track and were happy to do it, so it's like,
don't buy a ticket, you don't win the raffle, right?
Exactly, you got to be in it to win it.
Wow. So, exciting times on the horizon, and it's an exciting time to be a OSC fan, as I am. It sounds like you're doing exactly what I wanted to hear more from you in the future. Cool. These big vocal tracks. Manifesting this, the collective part of the Science Collective is, it's finally taking fruit.
Yeah, hopefully.
Exciting. Cool, man. Let's wrap it up. But thank you so much for
well, no, thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
What a pleasure.
And ultimately, that is everything from us this time round.
Short and sweet.
It has been short and sweet, hasn't it?
It's like me.
What we'll do though, Rob, I think next time we'll just drag you into the next one anyway, because I think it's always useful to have an extra voice.
You darlings.
An extra
That'd be
brain.
a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been good having you.
Absolutely. So is there anything that you gentlemen would like to discuss or advertise or bring forward before we close today's chat?
Quick donor plug. Jay and I put out a new single on Friday, which is called Desire Path.
I was going to say that, but I thought that'd be too sycophantic.
Yeah, no, you don't want to go full sycophant. It's cool. It's in between albums, we've just been putting out like a steady stream of singles where we're trying different things out, whilst we're not in album mode. This one's a bit of a family affair because Jay's missus Kira did the artwork, and my partner Flick helps out on the vocals. So it's mainly me singing, but there's dozens and dozens of layers of sort of kind of slightly whispery vocals, which me and my partner did. So it's like a
nice,
either a sickening or a sexy song, depending on depending on your opinion. But yeah, it's cool, and just like it's probably like the closest thing Donor Lens has done to like what people imagine we do, which is to write completely original music and then vaporize it, which we haven't actually done a huge amount of. I think people got certainly when we got started, people were quite fixated on us being like a sample free act, which was never really true. But this is a fully original song that we then slowed down and kind of blissed out a bit. And then on the B side, there's a version called Desire Slush, which is sort of 10 minutes of extremely woozy, kind of ecstatic pop music.
See, I'll be honest. I preferred the Slush version.
Me too.
Not to say that the other one wasn't there, but it's just my vibe. I think it's and like you say, it's 9-10 minutes. It's just constant.
Yeah,
lovely.
And it kind of disintegrates into sort of hiss. I heard
blissful hiss.
We got some feedback from somebody saying that they wanted it to be 5 minutes longer and for the tune to come back in, which I quite like. So we might have to make an extended version of this extended version.
Remix.
But it's a bit like, I know I'm sort of slightly deviating here, but it's a bit like the Runners Club 95 remix that you did for
I was about to say that.
as well. Because that, that's really long.
Yeah.
It's you're invested in it, or it's just on while you're working, and before you know it, you've kind of fallen into a bit of a, what would the word be? Oh, that's my cat trying to get in. You're in a...
You've been burgled.
I know, it does sound like that. Apologies. You're in a trance. That's the word I want to use, trance. Yeah.
Oh, cool. I'm glad you like both of those long versions. I think with the Runners Club one, we were, having to be the other remix, where the other remixer is Luxury Elite, we were slightly eclipsed.
On a par.
Perhaps. We do two very different things, and she's got an amazing career. We're just getting started.
Precisely.
A Runners Club are largely non-sampling as well, or sample themselves.
Yeah, they're entirely self-sampling, so they're much better behaved than we are. I think we started out with the intention of basically doing what they do, which is a very disciplined, entirely legal approach, and then we've just got no attention span, and we lack focus, which I think is what some people like about our music, but.
Fewer lawsuits.
We're not especially disciplined.
But that's why Area was so great.
It is an ill-disciplined record, all over the place.
But
Bandcamp loved it.
How do you know when to stop with tracks like that? In terms of them being 9 minutes, 10 minutes, does there come a point where you think, actually, I could have made 2 cups of tea at this point. I could have, or is it very much just kind of like? Audibly, you've done what you wanted it to do.
I think this is turning into an interview with Thom. I'm enjoying it.
Yes, right. I'll touch upon it.
I've always, it's something I used to do loads in the past, and something that I've been doing more of again, which is getting back into DJing and playing really long edits and sort of disco remixes and stuff with really long intros and really long outros. I really like. Tunes where there's sort of a 3 or 4 minute pop song at the heart of it, but then you got these, extended intros, you got a breakdown, you got an extended outro. I always thought it was funny when a track is sort of 10, 11, 12 minutes and then it fades out. That's always kind of, tickled me. We've done basically that a couple of times. I think just on those 2 tunes. I don't think we're going to make a total habit of all our songs being 10 minutes long, but it's nice to do occasionally.
Fabulous. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. Stepping into Enzo's shoes is always a difficult thing, but we did what we could while he was. But then at the same time, we were more efficient.
I think so. And he's probably only got small shoes anyway. Yeah. How big are his feet? What is he? 7, 8?
Yeah, and if they are, they're probably sliders. You seen those sliders that people wear? Those fluffy ones. I think he's got a bit of that going on.
I'm afraid he's got a pair of them, isn't he?
We will wish him all the best. He is a very unwell, sick man.
I think he wears plimsolls.
Is it a plimsoll?
Little plimsolls.
Like old school plimsolls.
Yeah.
Like you'd jump a horse in your gymnasium at school.
In your 70s PE lessons, yeah.
Yeah. If you forgot your kit, you did it in your pants and plimsolls.
Yes, I had to do that once. It was not. Yeah, I've definitely got memories of having to be. They just.
Semi-naked.
They were shit to kids back then, weren't they?
They were tough days. I was saying to my kid the other day when I was trying to get him to do something, I said, "You're lucky because Miss Dibbins at primary school made me wash my mouth out with soap and water, and she had to look at my teeth to see the soap on my teeth. It was bad days, man. Dark early 80s days.
She'd be in some sort of tribunal under that.
Yeah, she would be. Yes, she would be. The 80s wasn't all good, kids.
No, it really wasn't. No, it really. The 90s was a little bit better, but that's about it.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. You'll be. We will drag you back in, and it won't be kicking and screaming. I'm sure. We'll drag you back.
Feel free to drag me in, mate. It's very nice of you to invite me in, and so thanks, lads.
Catch you soon, and cheers, Thom. Thank you.
Cool. See you next time.